Peugeot's improved 2008 is a small crossover that offers an arguably more sophisticated take on the kind of little urban SUV style design popularised by cars like Nissan's Juke. Supermini based, it offers all the advantages of that compact runaround you were thinking of, together with the kind of added space, style and light off-road drivability you probably never expected to be able to enjoy on a small car budget. The smarter looks of this revised version aim to draw attention to a very efficient range of engines, plus there's extra media connectivity and stronger standards of safety.
Fashion can take many forms, especially when it comes to segments in the automotive market. Here, we're going to look at one of them, the Supermini-based compact crossover, epitomised in this case by this improved first generation of Peugeot's 2008. Now, its chosen sector may be fashion-led, but here's a car that still emphasises sense and sensibility in what has become an ever more competitive class. If you are shopping for a model of this kind, you'll probably have noticed just how quickly this category is growing. Back in 2010, Nissan's Juke set the ball rolling, showing other brands that if you took a Supermini and then rebodied it with more adventurous, higher-set SUV-style looks, then strong sales would inevitably follow. Since then, we've seen a wide variety of different approaches in this sector. Contenders like this Peugeot and Renault's Clio-based Capture model tend towards the more affordable end of the spectrum, while in contrast, cars like Honda's HR-V and Jeep's Renegade try and target those with plump budgets to blow on an even trendier car of this kind. Peugeot's approach certainly seems to have been effective in terms of overall sales, with over 500,000 2008 models sold in this model's first 3 years of production, following its original launch in 2012. Though it's based heavily on the French brand's 208 Supermini, this little crossover has built on the virtues of that model by offering extra space and flexibility, a higher set driving position, more individual looks and the option of mild off-road ability. All for not much more money than was being asked for its showroom stablemate, so you can see why it's proved to be popular. Going forward though, it's been clear for some time that early class leaders like this one are going to have to work a lot harder to sustain their share in this growing segment. Almost every other mainstream brand is now well established in this class, and customers are having their heads turned by an ever more fashionable selection of choices. It's for that reason that in recent times Peugeot has been significantly updating the engine range available in this 2008 model, a programme of improvements that culminated in mid-2016 with the launch of this facelifted first generation version, a car with smarter styling, stronger standards of safety and extra media connectivity. Will it all be enough, though, to allow this contender to retain its place as one of the more popular picks in the sector? Let's find out. So, what on earth should we expect here? The beefy looks and the high driving position are mildly suggestive of four-wheel drive capability. The small, low-set steering wheel with its wrist flick action seems to promise sportiness. And the light steering, the big glass area and soft ride are the kind of thing you'd find on a small MPV. So has Peugeot created from all this an endearing piece of compact family transport? Or a car that can't quite make up its mind what it wants to be? We're still not quite sure, but we think a lot of people will probably like it, and here's why. First off, because the higher, more commanding driving position and the mildly SUV-style feel have been achieved without too many obvious changes to the nippy, well-balanced handling of the 208 Supermini, from which this car is largely derived. Now that's assuming that you don't go throwing the car around too much. If you do, then the 96mm taller body of this 2008 makes itself felt with a bit of extra body roll. Nor is corner turn-in when you're pushing on particularly sharp, but then it rarely is on this class of car, and it certainly helps that there's plenty of grip. At least the way the cabin's figured makes you feel sporty, in a slightly counterintuitive way actually, given that you're perched up a few inches higher than the norm. And it's all down to a so-called I-cockpit layout lifted direct from the 208 that sees you grasping the smallest steering wheel you'll find this side of a supercar. Now, that's a potential problem, you might think, given in that most vehicles you view the instrument cluster through the wheel spokes. Here though, you don't have to, because the instrument pack has been moved to sit up above the wheel rim as it would do in, say, an MPV. Now, the end result might not suit everyone, but we like it because it enables you to keep an eye on the dials without taking your attention too far from the road. No need then for pricey head-up displays. So on to engines. Now, you may think that a 3-cylinder unit, just 1.2 litres in size, is a little small to be used right across the 2008 petrol range. Don't underestimate Peugeot's PureTech technology though. True, it's not especially impressive in entry-level, normally aspirated 82 brake horsepower guys. With just 118 newton meters of torque, this power plant struggles a little more than it does in a 208 in lugging this little crossover's larger body along. Though the performance figures rest to 62 miles an hour in 13.5 seconds en route to 105 miles an hour are respectable by class standards. You'll need to add a couple of seconds to that sprint time though if you opt for the robotized semi-automatic ETG transmission. It's much better though, if you can, to get this engine in its turbocharged guise, in which form it develops either 110 or 130 brake horsepower. Now here you get around twice as much pulling power, and that's enough for a brake towing capacity of 1,250 kilos. As for performance figures, well, in the 110 bhp variant, you'll see the 0 to 62 miles an hour sprint time dispatched in 9.9 seconds en route to 119 miles an hour, or 10.3 seconds and 117 miles an hour if you go for this derivative with the EAT6 automatic transmission. Opt for the 130 brake horsepower model and it's a manual only package with 6 ratios rather than 5, and performance figures that improve to 9.3 seconds and 124 miles an hour. Most 2008 buyers though will continue to want a diesel. All this model's black pump fueled options now use more efficient blue HDI technology, provided here by a 1.6 litre unit developing either 75, 100 or, as in this case, 120 brake horsepower. Now, if you're likely to be towing anything, then you'll want to avoid the base 75 brake horsepower variant, which can only lug along up to 930 kilos and takes 13.8 seconds to get to 62 miles an hour on the way to 103 miles an hour. Better is the Blue HDI 100 model, which can pull 1,270 kilos and improves the performance stats to 11.3 seconds and 112 miles an hour. Here though, we're trying the top Blue HDI 120 variant, which gets the advantage of a 6-speed version of the manual gearbox, and it can tow up to 1,300 kilograms and manage performance figures of 9.6 seconds and 119 miles an hour. For the black pump fueled models, there's no automatic gearbox option. That leaves only the question of off-tarmac prowess. Now yes, despite the fact that there's no four-wheel drive option on this car, you actually do get some, provided you specify one of the upmarket trim levels that come complete with Peugeot's proven grip control system. By breaking a wildly spinning front wheel, this setup works with the standard ESP stability control program to transfer torque to the tyre that has the most traction, and this, along with the standard mud and snow tyres, is enough to enable negotiation of some surprisingly sticky situations. True, with only 165 millimeters of ground clearance, it won't ultimately enable this car to go any further than its compact crossover counterparts off-road, but it'll certainly give you a useful advantage on slippery forest trails or on country lanes, say, during the next snowy snap. Control of the setup is via this rotary knob, which offers dedicated modes to deal with either snow, mud or sand, or indeed to turn all the electronics off completely, as you might want to do, for example, when braking on gravel or slush, when locked up wheels can actually build up a little buffer in front of them to help you stop. If you're one of those people who like the idea of a small crossover class car but think more ostentatiously styled contenders in the class like Nissan's Juke and Ford's EcoSport look, well, rather silly, then the subtly fashionable shape of this Peugeot 2008 will suit you perfectly. Now, my only comment would be that to really make the packaging work and make this car identifiable as any kind of SUV-style crossover, you really need the little extra styling touches that only come as standard with pricier trim levels. Things like wheel arch extensions and the front and rear scuff plates. The changes made to this improved model mostly centre on the front end, where the restyled bonnet no longer features a Peugeot Lion badge. That's been moved to the centre of this smarter, more distinctive grille that brings the look of this model into line with that of the brand's second generation 3008. As before, this is flanked by these unusually shaped headlamps, supposedly styled to outline a cat's pupil. And further down, fog lamps with chrome trimmed surrounds sit either side of this less overt lower air intake. You discover rather more though about the thinking behind this car by viewing it in profile. Arguably the defining element of this design is to be found in the middle of the roofline, where this curious kink above the centre B pillar rises up to meet the chromed roof rails. That and the rather arbitrary crease that flows through the rear door handle might well distract you from the fact that this Peugeot is actually a little bigger than its most direct rivals, 24mm longer than the Nissan Juke and 37mm longer than a Renault Captur. At the rear, smarter LED tail lamps that light up with their so-called luminous claw motif frame the 2008's subtle shoulder line, but otherwise things are just as they were previously. This high-set roof spoiler and the bee-sting aerial beyond it look neat, but as I mentioned earlier, without touches like this low silvered scuff plate, you'd probably struggle to identify this as a car from the crossover class. There's no doubt, though, that it's a more substantial thing than the 208 Supermini it's based on. The tape measure revealing a shape that's 200mm longer, 96mm taller and 25mm wider. Let's take a seat inside. Now, the feeling you get at the wheel of this car has always been one of the things that's most likely to sell it to you. So, Peugeot has hardly changed things at all as part of the updates made to this revised model. The French brand uses Faurecia, and that is the company who produce interior finishing for the premium German manufacturers. And they've used them to help with the cabin design, and it really shows. Step out of, say, a rival Renault Captur or Nissan Juke and then get into this 2008 and you probably feel you've gone up a whole class of car. We like the smart surfacing of this mid-level section of the fascia trim, which works well with the piano black highlights around the centre stack and the silver trim that you'll find on the steering wheel and on the doors. There's lovely design detailing too, revealed by touches like this stitched aircraft-style handbrake and these rather curious laser-cut tears in the roof lining that come to life at night with ambient backlighting. We particularly like the styled metal look gear knob and the cool blue frames around the instrument binnacle dials. Yes, the instrument binnacle. Now, the style and positioning of this and the tiny steering wheel is part of the car's unusual so-called iCockpit interior design, something that's always been a major talking point with this model. You have to view the dials over the top of the steering wheel rim, and initially it can take a bit of adjustment and fiddling around until you get to the point where you can see these gauges properly. That's something that not everyone may be able to manage completely to their satisfaction. Do that though, and for most, the benefits will be well worth having, namely wrist flick steering feel and instruments that are much closer to your line of sight on the roadway ahead. Yes, it is a bit of a culture shock. Yes, you'll eventually get to like it. And yes, you should ignore whinging journalists who don't. Just about everything else you need to know can be found on what looks like a tablet PC attached to the fascia, this multifunction 7-inch colour touchscreen, which is fitted as standard to all but the very cheapest entry-level models. In truth, its functionality can be a little awkward to get to grips with, but once you've mastered it, you'll get easy access to DAB radio stations, hands-free phone connectivity and media streaming via Bluetooth or a USB connection. Changes made to this improved model include the addition of a mirror screen feature that via Mirror Link or Apple CarPlay systems allows the monitor to display certain apps from compatible smartphones. Pay your dealer a little more and you can add satellite navigation. Plus, the screen can create in the car a Wi-Fi hotspot and provide you with an internet browser. There's also the option of a Peugeot Connect apps package, which will open up access to a whole range of informational features. Now, with these in place, your 2008 will be able to do things like warn you about traffic jams, locate a fuel station, find you a car park, and locate you a restaurant. There are also apps that will allow you to check the weather, search for tourist locations, find entertainment venues, and even search for a trader via a Yellow Pages function. Very clever. What we are glad this screen can't do is operate the ventilation controls. You have to have that functionality on Peugeot's larger 308 and 3008 models, which is irritating when you're trying to, follow a sat-nav or switch radio stations, and at the same time you want to adjust the cabin climate. Here, the ventilation buttons thankfully remain separate, located further down the centre stack. As for cabin practicality, that's a little bit limited by the tiny glove box and the fact that the door pockets don't have bottle mouldings. On the plus side though, you do get an open cubby by the driver's right knee, and this deep lidded storage box behind the handbrake is also useful. It would be rather more useful if it also incorporated USB and 12-volt ports so you could charge your phone out of the sight of prying eyes. Those sockets are actually in front of the gear stick, just above these twin cup holders. As for rear seat accommodation, well, the first thing to say is that the slight advantages this Peugeot enjoys in overall length over rivals like Nissan's Juke and Ford's EcoSport really show here, because this 2008 feels significantly less cramped in the back than either of those two cars. And this is especially true in terms of legroom, meaning that an average-sized adult can sit behind a 6-foot driver in reasonable comfort. Renault's rival Captur model can't match this standard of space either, although that car does provide a useful sliding rear bench. That's something that would have been a very handy addition on this Peugeot. Like most cars in this class, you'd really be pushing things if you wanted to try and accommodate 3 adults back here. In this case, that's made even more difficult by this prominent centre transmission tunnel. Now, perhaps it's best to remember that under the skin, 67% of this car is identical to the 208 Supermini it's based on, and that includes the wheelbase. So despite the fact that this 2008 model is longer, wider and taller than its donor car and has an area-feeling cabin thanks to its lower set glassy window line, the interior space it offers isn't ultimately that much different. So let's finish by taking a look at the luggage area out back. Now, the first thing you might notice is that, rather annoyingly, this parcel shelf doesn't lift with the tailgate. There's just this hinged edge that you can pull up to see the boot better. Take the thing out though, and a 422 litre area is revealed, the space enough being 20% more than you get in the 208, which means that it's one of the larger cargo areas that you'll find in this class. True, there's not quite the capacity you get in a Renault Captur, which could mean that you'll have to take the wheel off something like a baby buggy before you can squeeze that in. Still, there is around 70 litres more room here than you get in class favourites like Nissan's Juke, Ford's EcoSport, Fiat's 500X and Vauxhall's Mokka X. And it's all accessed via a usefully low 60cm loading lip. It's trimmed with a brushed stainless steel protector that unfortunately is likely to scratch up really quickly unless you're very careful. Practical touches include the usual tie-down points, plus there's a securing strap to the left and a little luggage net to the right for smaller items. There's an underfloor compartment too, but that's mainly filled with the spare wheel that Peugeot laudably includes as standard. Most competitors fob you off with those fiddly tyre repair kits. If you do need more room, then the 60/40 split folding rear bench pushes forward to reveal a completely flat load area with 1,194 litres of fresh air. At the lower end of the 2008 range, pricing that starts at under £14,000 makes this one of the most affordable small crossover models out there. Of course, you can spend a lot more than that if you want to, and prices actually range all the way up to as much as around £21,000. Standard transmission choices are based around a 5-speed manual gearbox, with only the priciest, most powerful petrol and diesel variants getting a 6-speeder. If you want to consider automatic transmission, well, then you have to have a petrol engine. Either the entry-level, normally aspirated PureTech 82 unit, which works with a simple robotised ETG setup, or the smoother and more sophisticated E86 Auto you'll be offered on the PureTech 110 Turbo variant. Overall, when you're considering this car, our basic premise would be that if you're looking at Peugeot's more conventional 208 Supermini, then you should also be considering a 2008, given that this crossover offers more interior space, the engineering is identical, and the price premium over a 208 isn't huge. Now, for some reason, the extent of that premium tends to vary. If you're looking at a base spec diesel, for example, the two models are priced very comparably. But further up the range, a 2008 could cost you around £700 to £1,000 more than an identically powered and trimmed version of its 208 Supermini stablemate. Before we get into the broader value proposition on offer here, there are a few things that it might be helpful for you to know about the 2008 range structure. Now, if you're shopping at the foot of the lineup, we can see why you might want to avoid the fairly feeble 82 bhp normally aspirated petrol unit and find the extra £1,500 necessary to trade up to the base Blue HDI 75 diesel, which at just over £15,000 is one of the most affordable black pump fuel models it's possible to buy in this segment. Above this level of the range, though, things have changed quite a bit since this 2008 model was originally introduced. It's all thanks to the installation of a couple of turbocharged PureTech petrol power plants that are far more competitive than the thirsty old 1.6 litre VTI unit they've replaced. That's the engine this car was stuck with from launch. As a result, we think that buyers with a bit more to spend on a 2008 might now find the premium required for diesel motoring a little difficult to justify, given the relatively small annual mileages that cars of this kind tend to cover. A 2008 and 1.2 litre PureTech 110 bhp petrol guys, for example, cost around £1,800 less than the same car with a comparably performing Blue HDI 120 engine. And that's the diesel variant we're trying here, which is a big difference in cost, given that the PureTech petrol variant can deliver efficiency figures that really won't be too far off those of its diesel counterpart, especially when you take into account the slightly cheaper fuel you'll be using. Anyway, enough about the 2008 range. Time now to look at how this Peugeot's pricing proposition stacks up against the compact crossover competition. So we'll start by pitching this Peugeot against the two rivals that are probably closest in cost and concept, Nissan's Juke and Renault's Captur. Now, both are a little pricier than this Peugeot. Let's take the entry-level variants as an example. If you're considering a Juke or a Captur model over an equivalent 2008, the list price figures suggest that you'll need to think in terms of having to find around £700 to £1,000 more if you're looking at base petrol power, or £1,000 to £1,500 more if you're wanting a base diesel. Now, that is a significant advantage for this car in this tightly fought sector of the market. Look around at the other options in this segment and the same theme continues. Now, true, the Peugeot PSA Group's crossover counterpart, Citroën C4 Cactus, can undercut a 2008 in base petrol form, but it costs quite a lot more in diesel, guys. And the same applies to another contender you might be considering in this category, the Kia Soul. Otherwise, pretty much everything else comparable in this sector costs a bit more. The exceptions limited to bargain basement brand small crossovers like SsangYong's Tivoli, which would actually only save you a few £100, or Dacia's Duster, which, although it's very cheap, is a cruder and more utilitarian thing than this Peugeot. As for more common competitors in this segment, well, think in terms of having to pay around £800 more for a comparable Fiat 500X and around £1,500 more for an equivalent Ford EcoSport. You'll also pay around £1,500 more than you'd have to find for a base petrol 2008 if you want entry-level versions of Suzuki's S-Cross and Vitara models. That's for a petrol-powered variant. Diesel derivatives of both these models are really quite expensive, starting from around £21,000 for an S-Cross Cross at about £18,000 for a Vitara. Most of the other cars you might mention in this category are models you'd probably only look at if you're considering a plusher, more powerful model on the 2008 range, a variant like this one. Popular small crossovers like Skoda's Yeti, Vauxhall's Mokka X and Mazda CX-3 are only available with engines putting out 110 PS or more, and therefore are priced mainly in the £18,000 to £21,000 bracket. You could, though, quite easily find yourself paying significantly more than that for something in this segment, like Jeep's Renegade, Honda's HR-V, or a Mini Countryman. We would understand, though, if, having considered all the options, you conclude that this 2008 was the small crossover you really wanted. And if that's the case, then you're going to need to know just how generous Peugeot's been with the standard spec. Well, let's see. Now, bear in mind that the most affordable Access AC trim level restricts you to the feeblest engines and also lacks what is probably this model's key interior feature, the multifunction colour infotainment touchscreen. Still, if you can happily do without advanced media connectivity, then you may well find the spec of an entry-level 2008 to be quite reasonable. There is, after all, quite a lot included. As the Access AC trim name suggests, the equipment tally runs to air conditioning, this setup able to cool the rather small glove box, so chilling things like drinks and chocolate. You also get a few other items you might not expect at the cheapest end of the range, things like Bluetooth connectivity for your phone, smart claw effect LED rear lamps and a cruise control system that has a built-in speed limiter to help preserve your license in urban areas. There are also colour-coded mirrors and door handles, roof bars and a rear spoiler, plus remote central locking, power-heated mirrors, a trip computer, a height-adjustable driver seat, USB and aux-in ports and a 4-speaker CD stereo with steering column mounted controls. It's also now quite rare on a Supermini to find a spare wheel as standard, though for some reason you only get a reduced size space saver on diesel models. Should you go further and get a plusher variant? Well, most 2008 buyers do, if only to open up a wider range of engine and accessory options. Now, Peugeot asks buyers to find around £1,350 to upgrade themselves from Access AC to Active trim, and in return throws in that multifunction colour touchscreen we just mentioned with its mirror screen and Apple CarPlay connectivity and DAB radio. Active trim also includes things like 16-inch alloy wheels, front fog lights, an alarm and a leather trimmed steering wheel. Now, for most buyers, that'll be sufficient, but if you want to try the 110 or 130 bhp PureTech turbo petrol engines we've been recommending, the sophisticated EAT6 auto gearbox, or the top 120 bhp Blue HDI diesel engine, then it's necessary to go a step further up the trim hierarchy and get yourself an Allure spec model like this one. At this point in the range, the 2008 gets more of an SUV style look thanks to front and rear scuff plates and wheel arch extensions. Plus, you're also entitled to niceties like larger 17-inch alloys, auto headlamps and wipers, tinted rear windows, dual zone air conditioning, power folding mirrors and rear parking sensors. In addition, provided you've avoided the base 82 bhp petrol engine, there's Peugeot's clever grip control system too, which optimises traction based on selectable settings for different kinds of terrain. The only trim level beyond that is GT line, which gives you more dynamic detailing, a Cielo panoramic glass roof, satellite navigation, a reversing camera and sports pedals. And we reckon you'll hit the sweet spot in the 2008 lineup if you choose your car in Active or Allure trim and then make a careful perusal through the options list. And to make the most of the colour infotainment touchscreen, you're going to need things like a reversing camera and satellite navigation. And you'll probably want the Peugeot Connect apps package, which is activated by the 3G key you buy from your dealer and then insert into the USB socket of the car. Other possible options boxes that you might want to tick would give you features like a Peugeot Cielo panoramic glass roof, heated seats and a park assist system that'll automatically steer you into tight parallel spaces. Many of these features are only available from this Allure spec upwards, this also being the trim level that you have to get the option of full leather upholstery. A more practical touch would be to add on a tow bar. Otherwise, in terms of extra cost features, you're really just talking about visual embellishments. Now bear in mind that if you don't want your 2008 finished in either grey or white, then you're going to need to pay more for one of the extra cost metallic, pearlescent, or as in this case, varnish finishes. A range of optional 16 or 17-inch alloy wheels can complement your choice of shade. The selection on offer includes rims with shiny black finishing if you want it. On to safety. A 5-star Euro NCAP rating is justified by the standard inclusion of twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus ISOFIX child seat fastenings, tyre pressure monitoring, ASR anti-skid regulation and an ESP stability control system that includes a hill assist feature that stops you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. As you expect, there are also ABS brakes along with CBC, cornering brake control, and EBA, emergency brake assist, to help in panic stops, and those will be advertised to following motorists by automatically activating hazard lights. If you can afford to add a few safety options, then there are two we want to bring to your attention. Active City Brake works at urban speeds of up to 20 miles an hour, scanning the road ahead as you drive for potential accident hazards. If one's detected, then you'll be warned. Now, if you don't respond, or perhaps you aren't able to, then the brakes will automatically be applied to either avoid or decrease the severity of any resulting accident. The other key option is the clever Peugeot Connect SOS and assistance system. Now, in an accident, this setup will automatically summon the emergency services, and they'll know exactly where you are from the vehicle's GPS signal. That could be a lifesaver. If you're thinking of buying this 2008 as a slightly more versatile alternative to Peugeot's 208 Supermini, then one of the most important things you'll want to know about is just how much of a running cost penalty will be exacted by this crossover model's 85 kilos of extra weight. Now, fortunately, it's not too significant. Think in terms of a downside of no more than about 5%, which is good news if you like this car, because its engines are now amongst the cleanest and most frugal power plants that you'll find in this market segment. Or at least they are now. The 1.6 litre VTI petrol and EHDI diesel units this 2008 model was originally launched with were certainly nothing to write home about in terms of running cost efficiency. Peugeot has since put that right with its impressive PureTech petrol and Blue HDI diesel technology, though unfortunately not all the models in the range matched that with the company's S&S engine stop and start system. In the diesel lineup, the pokiest Blue HDI 120 unit we're trying here is the only power plant with that setup, which is why this variant's 96 grams per kilometre CO2 figure is the cleanest in the 2008 range. The other 1.6 litre Blue HDI models, 75 bhp version and 100 bhp variant, are only just behind on 97 grams per kilometre, and all three diesel derivatives return an identical 76.3 combined cycle fuel figure. It's showing that in this segment only Renault's Capture can match, and it means that a black pump fueled 2008 will take you around 7 more miles on every gallon than you get from diesel versions of rivals like Nissan's Juke, Fiat's 500X and Vauxhall's Mokka X. So how have Peugeot's engineers achieved such high standards of efficiency? Well, with Blue HDI diesel technology, the answer lies in a clever 3-step after-treatment system that's designed to better eliminate the 4 nasty pollutants that diesel units usually put out, namely unburnt hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides and particulates. The first stage sees the unwanted hydrocarbon and carbon monoxide elements converted into harmless water and carbon dioxide. In the second stage, that nasty nitrogen oxide also gets converted into water via a selective catalytic reduction process using a urea and water mixture called AdBlue, although you'll need to get that mixture topped up every 12,500 miles. And finally, in the third step, our particulate emissions filter eliminates virtually all particulates at a stroke. And the result of all this is industry-leading diesel technology that many manufacturers are struggling to copy. As for petrol power, well, there are really 2 sides to that in the 2008 lineup, with a 3-cylinder 1.2 litre power plant used across the range. Entry-level buyers get the same normally aspirated 82 bhp unit that this car was fitted with at launch, this delivering a class-competitive efficiency showing 57.6 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 114 grams per kilometre of CO2. Figures you can significantly improve to 64.2 miles per gallon and 102 grams per kilometre if you order this unit mated to the brand's robotised ETG automatic transmission. Further up the petrol range though, Peugeot's PureTech engineering really gets into its stride because it can be mated to turbo technology and S&S stop and start efficiency. Thanks to this, the PureTech 110 variant manages 64.2 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 103 grams per kilometre of CO2, which is way better than anything comparable in the class. Match this model with Peugeot's E86 automatic transmission and the figures don't fall too dramatically. You're looking at 58.9 miles per gallon and 110 grams per kilometre. Those, by the way, are the same figures that you'll also get from the PureTech 130 variant, and that's a derivative that's only offered with manual transmission. What else? Well, as usual, a new 2008 will come with the usual 3-year, 60,000 mile Peugeot warranty, which includes roadside assistance. And you can expect residual values after the usual 3-year ownership period to be pretty reasonable by class standards. The predicted 46% figure is on a par with rivals like Nissan's Juke, Renault's Captur and Kia's Soul. Servicing on most models is needed every year or every 12,500 miles, and the cost of garage visits should be affordable too. Although Peugeot's fixed price maintenance package, there's a choice of 3, 4 or 5 year plans, is a touch more expensive than rival schemes. You won't have to worry about any of that though if you're buying on finance using Peugeot's attractive Just Add Fuel scheme. This wraps up all your monthly costs into one easy payment, so as the name suggests, your only other cost will be the fuel. Finally, let's have a look at insurance groupings. Petrol people will find that the base 82 bhp PureTech variant is rated at Group 11E. The PureTech 110 derivative comes in at either Group 18A or 19A, and the 130 bhp model is rated at Group 21A. In the diesel range, you're looking at Group 15E for the Blue HDI 75, Group 19A for the Blue HDI 100, and Group 22A for the Blue HDI 120 model. Some manufacturers seem to believe a small crossover should be extreme, both in its styling and in the price premium it demands over the supermini it's based on. Peugeot, in contrast, think differently about a car of this kind. This 2008 may not make as overt a style statement as some of its rivals, but you sense that's intentional. It's for those shopping in this segment in search of something more subtly fashionable. These customers tend also to be people who appreciate this Peugeot's other key attributes, namely asking prices and running cost efficiency figures that are difficult to beat. As with most models of this kind, on paper, the advantages being offered over a standard supermini in space, styling and potential driving flexibility appear at first glance to be small. In practice though, they add up to a car that feels a far more rounded, more complete family tool. Well, not as a primary runabout perhaps, but a perfect second family vehicle. This improved first-generation model offers more of the same in this regard, though it's certainly more nicely packaged with more up-to-date electronics. The important updates made to this car, though, took place sometime before it was facelifted, the styling changes having really been made to draw attention to the substantially improved engine technology that now sits beneath the bonnet. Of course, there are things Peugeot could still improve. Like most small crossovers, this one isn't especially inspiring to drive, and not everyone likes the unusual i-cockpit steering wheel and instrument setup. We think, though, that this car needs design innovations of that sort. Models of this kind ought to be fashionable, innovative, and just a little controversial. Now, if that's what you want in this segment, but you don't feel the need to make any sort of supermarket car park statement, then you probably need to try this car.